Welcome to the We Heal for All podcast, emotional and spiritual support for those who feel the world deeply and want to be part of her change. I'm Liz Moyer Benfer-Hatt, founder of We Heal for All and collective healing practitioner. And in these episodes, I bring you conversations and tools on collective healing, the kind that help you have a healthier relationship with the world for your own healing, the healing of society, and being able to come together as community and collectively in order to move forward. In today's episode, I am bringing you a very, very special conversation with my dear friend, Ning Tendo. Ning is many things. She is a dream yogi with over 13 years of experience in Tibetan dream yoga. She is a spiritual healer who I think of her as just someone super deeply connected and committed to her spiritual practice. And on top of that, she has a formal degree in spiritual psychology from Columbia University. And she's also a grief specialist. In particular, she works with mamas who have experienced the profound loss of losing a child. And that's the work that she does most these days. Through her work at Multidimensional Mama, she offers a method called soul reunion and helps mothers understand that their deepest healing doesn't come from moving on, but from learning to love their child in new ways across dimensions. I wanted to have this conversation today, and it's part of this month's theme and exploration of how personal pain and things going on within one's personal life can get tangled up and mixed up with collective pain. And within this conversation is really a larger conversation about things like historical trauma and intergenerational wounds and ways that things beyond the here and now, beyond the current moment, and how we typically think about the current moment within Western society actually live. So when it came to having a conversation about the times that we live in and the deeper layers of connection, deep, wide, old, that we're all touching into these days, Ning was the person. This conversation was awesome. And I really hope you enjoy it. It took us in so many different places. So please check it out. And if you're not already, subscribe to this channel, to this Substack, to my podcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm about to launch a TikTok too. So please, let's connect and enjoy this conversation.
Get it out.
Ning, thank you so much for being here and just being with me. We just went through a little tech, a little tech tango.
It's been wonderful.
I'm grateful, man. Well, thank you so much. Truly, it's like such a privilege to be here with you. And when I was thinking about this conversation and this topic for this month, you and your work just rang true in my heart and in my mind. And so I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks. I'm really honored and grateful that you called me to have this conversation because I think it's one that's really ready to be had. So thank you.
Thanks for saying that. Just got chills. I mean, and maybe we even just start there, this ready to be had. You know, this moment that we live in right now feels so big. And really, what I wanted to start as just an initial thread to our conversation, knowing there's so many different entry points we could enter it through, is really that feeling of bigness. And in the work that you do, you work with mothers, with grieving mothers who have lost a child. And in particular, you help them see and understand their experiences of grief, in particular, the intensity of it, prolonged nature of it, as something that isn't just emotional distress or pain or something that's a mental health related thing, but that it actually has layers to it that conventional conversations about emotions don't necessarily speak to or point to or support. And I'm wondering if you could share about that, just how you help mamas understand the bigness of what they're experiencing.
Sure. Yeah. And it's very, from my experience, it's very different working with grieving mothers and other bereaved people. So in my life, I'd always been very much drawn to death and dying. I used to volunteer in hospice. And then ultimately, my mom died in 2018. And that really just took me into that underworld of grief. And it became a very much lived experience because that had been my worst nightmare my whole life. And so I started working with people who were grieving after I made that journey across the chasm.
Hmm.
But then in the work I did, I noticed that a lot of grieving moms were coming to me, and with other losses, other loss types, people might go for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they find a way to be able to live with the loss. But with moms, I saw them 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, and they were still in this very much deep anguish of grief. And I'm still working with them more at a deeper spiritual level. And I was finding that the connection between the child and the mother is a very intimate soul bond, and the death of a child creates what I like to call a sacred wound within a mother. Because
Hmm.
if you think about it, when a mom is pregnant with her child and she's growing this new life within her, her body is creating new organs like first the umbilical cord, like the womb is expanding. At the same time, at the energetic level, energetic structures are also developing to support this new connection, this new relationship. And so I would hear moms say things like, I feel like there's a hole in my heart. I feel like a part of me is missing. I feel this guilt. I failed. And working with conventional approaches, working with emotions, it just wasn't getting to the root of what the issue was. And so as I worked more with them, for example, when you look at something like guilt, and you go to traditional approach, and they might try to use like talk therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy to help you rationalize or realize that there's nothing you could have done to support your child or to save your child. But then at a deeper spiritual level, the mom is not just working with guilt, it's archetypal guilt. It's at an archetypal level because she's basically coming up against the archetype of the mother, the good mother who's supposed to protect her child, who's always her love should be enough to save her child. And so in her mind, she failed, and that's an archetype that she's working with. And so just talking about it doesn't get to the issue, and there's no room for healing at that level.
Hmm.
And so it's like, say you break your leg and you go to a therapist to help you with your broken leg, and you're talking about it. And a therapist can help you maybe cope with the emotions of a broken leg or like help you like mentally figure stuff out. But until you go to a doctor and have that bone set, it's not going to heal. And so it's a sense of working at different levels for different loss types.
That totally makes sense. No, it is so beautiful to hear just about these different layers,
Right,
of that archetypal layer, the psycho-spiritual layer between the bond of the mother
right,
and the child. And I know sometimes too you talk about it in terms of collective fields or even fields of connectivity, fields of relationality
right,
that are taking place. Maybe you could, just as we're kind of table setting here and setting up the
right.
conversation, you could share a little bit about that.
All right. So, from my perspective, most of us think that we're just a physical body, like the body that we see, made up of atoms, organic matter, flesh. But the reality is that at deeper levels, we have multiple bodies that are vibrating at different frequencies. And for example, we have an emotional body too. And when you say you feel emotions, anger, joy, shame, you're actually experiencing that through your emotional body, and it's vibrating at a certain frequency. You have a mental body. That's where you experience your thoughts, you experience concepts like who I am, your story about life, and just your place in the world. And then we have different higher spiritual bodies. And so, in terms of the relationship with a mom and her child, there's that connection at all these different levels. And so when the child dies, there's a disruption in that bond. And, the different bodies when we talk about collective fields, a collective field really, from my perspective, is an invisible energetic reality that holds a group of people together. And it's held in place by multiple different layers, biological layer, energetic layer, archetypal layer, spiritual layer. And so the emotional body, for example, let's talk about the emotional body, for example, of a mother and what happens when she loses her child. And so she's grieving the death of her child. But the issue is that she is born into a specific field of life. So she might be, let's say, it might be an African American mother, or it might be a Jewish mother or a Native American mother. And depending on the field that they're born into, there are different layers of grief, of trauma within that field. And if you're in a field, you're basically attuned to the energy signature of that particular field. And so when she loses her child, for example, she might feel a rage at life, at God, the universe, whatever you might want to call it, because her child died and think it's unfair. But then that rage might get amplified because then she might feel the rage of, let's say, an African American mother. There might be the rage of all the ancestors from slavery, all the times the women were raped, all the times the men were lynched. And so it's basically amplified. And for example, in a time like now, when there's so much chaos in the world, there's so much noise, the collective body of the US, for example, is completely activated right now. And so most of us have different pressure points that are getting activated and resonating at the same frequency as this pain. And so it's making everything feel so much amplified.
Mm, that is such a perfect way to put it. I think speaking about it in terms of bodies of pain can be really helpful. And I really appreciate that framing too of how loss, such as the death of a child, can ripple back to things that are either older or deeper or wider within one's ancestry, within even historically, right? A
Yes.
historical body that one may be part of. Yeah. And then these days, too, the world's pain is really up in our faces, too. So just this activation of these different layers, of these, I like to use the word collective wounds as just a
Yes.
catch-all to speak about, historical, intergenerational, etc.
Right.
What are you seeing in people these days? When you hear people say, and I think you already just started to touch on it, but just the bigness of what they feel and just feeling flooded and crushed in some ways by the weight of everything going on. Perhaps you can speak more to some of the things that you sense or notice underneath the surface or that might be going on for people underneath the surface.
Right, right. And so again, it's all coming back to that sense of the collective field and the energy bodies that we have, which we use to sense reality. So, for example, I want to talk a little bit about the energetic field. So, if you think about it, right, let's say that you have two people in a room and they have a really big argument, and you walk into that room and they're not arguing anymore, they're silent now. Even though you didn't experience the argument, you will feel the tension in the room, you will feel the heaviness in the room. It's not visible, you were not there, but you can sense it. And you're sensing that at an emotional, like your energetic body and like the nervous system. And so if you think of a collective field, for example, like what we're experiencing right now in the world, in the US, for example, just scale that up at a massive level. And so basically, every group shares an energetic signature that's basically the signature of the shared experience of that group, whether it's holding all of their joy, all of their unhealed trauma, their unhealed wounds. And that particular frequency is vibrating at the frequency that everybody who's in it is attuned to. And so, for example, we're all in the US right now, and there are multiple fields and there are multiple realities going on right now at the subtler levels. And we are all part of those fields. And so, for example, in America right now, you have an African American collective field which was suppressed. Basically, people in that field had to suppress rage to survive. You have an immigrant field where people were expected to suppress their identity to survive. You have the women in the field who are expected to suppress their voice to survive. You have all of these different fields, the Native Americans suppressing their grief to survive. And so, right now, all of these trauma fields are getting fully activated. And so, for most of us, because we have pressure points, resonant points with these different fields, we're part of those different groups. When we see something in the news that brings like something like it could be an ICE raid, it could be somebody whose rights are getting trampled upon, it activates something within us, a rage, it could be fear, it could be guilt, all of these different feelings. And we might be experiencing them from our personal life too, but then it basically has a ripple effect, right? It's activating through all of these different levels. There's the personal, say, rage or anger I'm feeling right now. And then, for example, in my family, there might have been issues of violence or different things going on that are getting activated, like the rage from that hasn't been healed. And so I'm turning that on too. And then there's the whole lineage, and then there's the culture. And so it's all of these different layers that are getting activated. And for people who, for example, are mourning or are grieving or are going through difficult life transition, the usual barriers that we have to protect ourselves are down. And so we're more permeable to pain. And so it's literally going directly at the cellular, like physical level. And so everything feels so much big because in essence, I feel like we as a nation, we're going through a dark night of the soul. So think of the personal level, it's basically reflected at the collective level. And so we're feeling everything. So um it's very overwhelming, it's very big because there is a lot going on at the collective, subtle, energetic level right now.
It makes me really want to jump to opportunity within it. And I almost want to put a pin in that because there's so much substance, there's so much to unpack and explore within the challenge of it all. I can feel it in my body right now. I can feel these layers of like muck, but it's like raw, it's old, there's crust. Just to even like ground this a little bit, I wanted to share a personal story within my own life. So I'm a new mom. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and an amazing partner. Anis, my husband, he's truly amazing, and we have worked really hard to build the relationship and the family and the container that we have to take these steps of bringing new life into. It's very interesting because the uh, journey of young parenting, of parenting a baby, the sleepless nights, the sacrifice, really, the kind of scooping deep from within, giving outward. It's tough, right? It's tough on the best of us. It's interesting because I've noticed in my experiences at time, and Resma Meniken, are you familiar with Resma's work at all? He wrote My Grandmother's Hand, and
No.
yeah, it's really such a
Mm,
profound book around racialized trauma in the US. And he has this quote in it that goes, "If it's hysterical, it's historical."
mm,
That rings in my head all the time. And it's funny, even bringing up the word hysterical starts to touch on some gender-based collective wounds that I feel in there, just the way that, hysterectomy tied to the word hysterical and women have been made to feel, so again, as
yes.
an aside, and in this practice, because I really think of it as a practice of sensing into my experience what layers are there, noticing what I notice within myself around all sorts of different experiences when there are collective wounds, when there are these other pain bodies that are
Right.
using my current experience as an outlet to come through and make themselves known.
No. Right.
And so with the motherhood example, there are totally times when, something happens, right? Like schedules change and on a dime I've got to pivot and, the load of it all, take on more than maybe we had agreed on. And there is such this feeling of like deep like rage and grief and almost like just resentment that comes through that because my partner and husband is so good and is so like, we're in it together. And of course, we're always learning and growing, but like there's such a solid base. It gives me context of being like, oh, wow, that particular thread that's coming through for me right now around this instance is actually something else. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's actually something quite from my family system or from like or even just the identity group of being a mom in a society
Right.
where like motherhood still isn't valued in the way that it should be. So I wanted to just drop in that example as
As I was listening to you right now, I can feel the cry of the collective mother field right now, and the lack of support that mothers have, and the lack of the village, those communities that used to be in place to support women in motherhood. And the more you sit with the energy, and it's just really bringing that awareness, I feel internally, and asking the question. And this is from my spiritual teacher, Ron, who you know. And the question is always, what's inside of this?
mm,
When you feel something, sadness, shame, what's inside of this, and noticing the images, the memories, the locations in your body that are getting activated. And usually for me, like the signs that you're working with different layers beyond just your personal story is, for example, is the intensity proportional to proximity to whatever is going on? So, for example, if you read something or you hear about a story that is on the other side of the world or that has nothing to do with you, and you have a reaction. It might be even like something where you have an issue with like self-esteem and you're worried about, let's say, partners cheating or that kind of stuff, and you hear somebody's story from somewhere else and you get very activated, very much into it. And then you're like, whose story am I carrying right now? So
mm,
if your reaction is the intensity of it is really big in relation to the proximity to the actual situation, it's probably a deeper layer that's speaking through you. Also, if the intensity of the feeling is bigger than the situation. For example, even like just reading about in the news about like a family that was here for 20 years that got deported, and then you fall into like a deep, deep despair, or you just feel this big rage or this big shame. And it's the emotions, like it comes over you like a dark cloud. It feels so much bigger. You're like, why am I feeling this way? Like, I shouldn't be feeling this way for this long. It's probably something that's collective. Another for me telltale sign is when it's persistent and it's just there, it's relentless. And is this something that you've been dealing with for a long time? And it might show up as like an addiction, as a depression, like these different ways that it shows up. And you've tried everything: therapy, rituals, journaling, yoga, meditation, nothing is working. Then it's pointing to something that's a deeper layer within you. But for me, the easiest is always just asking the question, what's inside this? And is this mine, or does this belong to something bigger than my story?
mm. I love how you put it too. Whose story am I carrying?
Yeah, because we're very much entangled. Like most of us are living stories that are not ours. There are stories that belong to our ancestors, our lineage. For example, think of, let's say you have a grandmother who grew up or who was from the Holocaust times, and she had a period in her life where she didn't have food to eat and she starved. And so she was always worried, like even after that period, she's always worried that this to make sure there's always food in the pantry, like always oversupplying. And then she has a daughter, and this daughter now picks it up and she has this anxiety around scarcity and food, and she's always wanting, like to have stuff. And then you have the granddaughter, and before you know it, you don't even know the origin, but you're carrying that story and you find yourself always like, I need to carry a snack around me all the time in my
Mm.
purse. And you're wondering why, because you're carrying your grandmother's story. And so we really are all entangled, and we have these stories and different like threads that we're living, and it's always trying to, the work is healing ourselves, so we separate ourselves so that we have the space to take our life and our story forward for this incarnation.
Mm. It makes me wonder, do you find that with the women that you work with the mamas that you work with, it is about supporting them in that almost reclamation of that connection with their loved one or with that kind of tie?
Yeah, and so it's interesting because personally I feel we each have something unique, something special to offer to the world at this time. And it comes out in many different ways, and it's always really about, where are you contributing from? Are you contributing from heart, from compassion, or from trauma? And so, for example, I really, really like dream work, and in particular with grieving moms. Like, I found that what is most healing for them is to have a dream reunions, visitation dreams with their children.
Mm.
Because what happens is, when a mom has that visitation dream with her child, it shifts something at all levels of her being. Like, there's the healing is atomic, cellular, emotional, mental, spiritual. I know I work with this mom, and she told me I had this dream. I just, like, it did something to me. My daughter, she healed me at the deepest levels, because when you have those dreams, right? You're out of your physical body. You're out of, like, you're entering a higher state of consciousness where your child still exists. And so you're coming out of time, out of space. You're entering at a level of consciousness where your child still exists. And at that level of consciousness, you're out of the trauma field, you're out of the pain field, and you have a different perspective. And so when you wake up from that, you're not the same. You're still grieving, but you're just not grieving.
Mm.
And you're no longer just radiating this sense of despair and this sense of hopelessness, which is really prevalent in with grieving moms, like this sense of, like, there's no point for me to live anymore. Like, a piece
Mm.
of me is missing. I feel like there's a hole in my heart. Like, how do I live this way? When you have those dreams, it heal something at the most fundamental level. And so you're no longer, like, your energy, you're no longer just radiating despair. You're radiating, in a sense, a more groundedness, a sense of more peace, a sense of more presence. And everybody around you feels it. Your family, like your other children, if you have them, they feel safer. Your partner might be able to breathe, and it really ripples through your family field.
Mm.
And so that work, so you take it, and most people think that when they do individual healing, it's selfish, but that's your soul contribution to the field. Because again, as I said, we're all entangled, and so when one person starts healing, it causes a shift in the frequency of the entire field. There's a crack in the
Mm.
field, and it opens a space for a new possibility, a new way of being, a new way of moving forward. And that's the work I do with grieving moms, because you have that first dream, and then all the different layers, whether it's a guilt, we start incubating questions, so you start collaborating with your child's soul to heal.
Oh,
Because
wow.
in their sense, it's that's like the only person that really, when they have that connection, and like, okay, it's one thing if you ask your child, like, did your life was your life too short? Were you meant to die now? It's one thing if they tell you, this was part of my soul's contract, this was meant to be. if they tell you and you have that validation from them, is a very different thing than if people tell you all that from the outside.
Yeah.
That lived experience it's very, it heals you, it rearranges, it reorganizes you at the deepest levels, like literally.
I feel that. It is a different thing to intellectually understand something or even receive
Yes.
something from outside of you, but to actually have that felt sense, that lived, that soul knowing. It makes me think about all that we are attuned to these days in this world, in this very loud, painful, chaotic world, and the opportunity within it. I'm going to come back to the opportunity. That is what
Yeah.
I just heard, and what you just shared
Right.
there was, you know, through such a deep, harrowing process of grief. It sounds like the mothers that you work with also reclaim a connection with their child and possibly even with parts of themselves
Yes.
that
Yes.
allows them to not only move forward, but also vibrate at a different frequency, right? That reorganization that you shared
Right.
sounds so empowering and uplifting and just even shaping, soul
Yes.
shaping in terms of who she is meant to be in this world and who
Right.
this world and who her family system needs her to be. And so when I think about all of these collective wounds and all these layers of pain body, ancestral, historical, intergenerational, that the times are almost, giving us, forcing us, right, to be in touch
Yes.
with more. I wonder if you'd be down to spitball with me on this of the opportunity within it, because I do sense such opportunity in it.
Right. And just, I want to close a loop really quick with the mamas before going to more general. And that's why my work, or call it multidimensional mama, it's because it's when you do this deep soul level healing work, you realize that your child's death has initiated you into
Mm.
another level of reality. You become multidimensional, and it hasn't constricted you or made you less than, you're even more, because you're able to mother across dimensions and access these different levels of reality. And all of these different indigenous cultures, they knew this. The Lakotas, the different Native American tribes, Aboriginal Australians, they knew this, and they knew that mothers were wisdom keepers, and that once a mother lost her child, she was initiated into a sacred space, and she became a dream walker, and she was the one that was
Mm.
connecting people. She became the medicine woman, the healer, and she was able to walk between worlds. And this is something that we have lost in our modern world, where we try to pathologize everything, and it's always like, something is wrong with you. And so for me, depending on who I'm talking to, I really use the word like this death or this grief is offering you an opportunity or it's an initiation, because it depends on where the person is. If you told me that when my mom died, well, I would have beat you up, like I
Right.
was in
For
this
sure.
very raw rage state. And so for me, it's like an invitation to sit and to work with the pain, really, because for me, it's like, as you said, like in these times right now, it's really an initiation for everyone, because the pain, it's been activated, it's come to the surface, and if it has come to the surface, it means that it's ready to be seen and to be worked through and to be released. And for this ancestral work, my spiritual teacher Ron, he we do this work called constellations, spiritual and family constellations, where we work with the family field. And he had this really beautiful constellation that he kind of had us go through, where you turn back to your ancestors and you go into your mind's eye and you sit with them in circle and you turn to them and you speak to them and you basically acknowledge them and thank them for the gift of your life, and for the courage and for the loyalty and the compassion that pretty much has brought the generations forward, but you also acknowledge to them that the pain that you're carrying is theirs, it's not yours, and you can no longer carry it. Within this life, you're asked to find a greater way, and so you bow in gratitude to them, but you take your place fully in your life to move forward. And so it's doing that, really deep ancestral work, and really in the healing work, they just want to be seen and they want to be embraced. And so, working through rituals to like see their pain and embrace it through their heart. And then when we do that, those pressure points, those activation points, we're able to raise our frequency out of the trauma frequency into like a higher level of reality. And that becomes our offering to our lineage, this healing, this new way of being. We open a new possibility, a new frequency for our lineage so that it doesn't go forward in the same way that it has gone in the past.
So beautiful. Listening to you, I find myself moving between these different timelines of reality, the timelines of opportunity that I do sense and feel here, as well as the sober reality of the injustice and breakdown that's taking place.
Yes.
And it is that experience, for me at least, of moving between those worlds and seeking to integrate them, integrate their, because meta narratives about this time of it's the dark night of the soul, we're being initiated, there's opportunity here, I feel are necessary, they're helpful. I receive from them. I know that others receive from them. And then there's also the grounded reality of, like you said, ice raids, of war, of racism, of hate that exist and that are also activated right now, that are
Right,
alive, that
right.
are present, that are real. It does continue to take me out into, okay, thinking about our world as a collective body, as an animate
Yes.
being who is in her own developmental process, right? She's going through her own journey as a collective, as a being. When kind of the ugly bits are out and about and on show and
Yeah.
alive, again, it does take me to, okay, this is real. It's been here. It's not new necessarily. Parts of it are like in fuller force right now.
Yeah.
It brings me to cycles. It brings me
Yes.
to, the cyclical nature of life, the cyclical nature of creativity, of creation itself, the cyclical nature of civilizations
All right.
too. Sometimes, and I posed this question once in one of Ron's trainings, the spiritual teacher that you practice deeply with, and of sometimes I can think about healing as being like, oh, well, if we all just heal, then almost as something linear, right? Oh, well, if we
Right,
all just
right,
healed, then we would get to some kind of place, right? We would get to some
right.
kind of end goal. And something that I hear in your work is around not necessarily even negating pain or dismissing pain or pushing it away, but relating to it differently. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yes, you actually brought up a lot of points which are really important because for me, it's very important to have a grounded spirituality, a spirituality that's grounded in here and now. Because I like to, like the work I do, I like to think of it as practical magic, like
Mm-hmm.
bringing this, like the practical, like the everyday grounded with also like the opening to the mystery and that which is greater, that which we cannot like put a finger on. So when it comes with sitting with pain and just being with all of this pain, so I have a few different points to make. So the first thing before I go, I want to talk a little bit about our inner nature, the soul nature, the higher self, whatever people may call that. And I feel like sometimes in spiritual circles, we use that so much that we kind of lose the meaning of what exactly does that mean. And I like the analogy of if you think about the sun and the earth, the sun is what creates the gravitational anchor that stabilizes and keeps the earth in orbit. The sun is what provides all the light the heat, the energy that sustains the earth, that drives photosynthesis, that influences global patterns, weather. The sun is what makes the earth habitable. Without the sun, it would be a frozen wasteland that life cannot exist. For me, that's how I equate the soul, the inner soul nature, with the personality of who we are. So you can think of the soul as the sun and the earth as us as a personality. And there's that part of us that's radiating this frequency of love, grace. This is what is sustaining us and keeping us here alive. When it comes to things like collective pain that we're experiencing, like let's go break it down. Let's say it's rage, because I feel like rage is what is really active right now in the field, rage and grief. And working with that rage, just me as a person, as a woman, working with the collective rage, I can't do it. It's impossible to be able to process and work with that type level of rage by yourself. And so that's why the practice becomes grounding yourself, connecting to the earth field for stability. And it could be as easy as just bringing awareness to the feet, entering into the heart space. And the heart space is really, it's just entering that space where you're acknowledging the rage and you're inviting the rage into your heart. And the very difficult part is figuring out a way to put yourself in agreement with the rage. Because
Mm.
most times when the emotions, whether it's rage, it's grief, it's shame, we judge it, we push it away. And it's like, how do I bring myself in agreement with this rage, this emotion? Because when you're able to do that, then there's an opening for the life field to come through to support you and to bring in, because the rage is not just empty, it comes with wisdom, it comes with teaching, but we have to be able to embrace it. And this embrace is, we work with the part of us that's unconditional love, and you can just use that love if you don't believe in source or whatever soul. You're using the power of love, and when that rage is coming, you're embracing it from that well of unconditional love, and you're bringing it in as a mother will bring a, you're bringing a wounded child to a mother, and you're bringing this woundedness in within you to be held and to be embraced. And from that space, there's a complete reorganization that takes place. And, you know, I say this because this is my practice. This is what I do, what I work with people. But to be able to get to this place, I know for many people, maybe it's not practical. You're like, what does all you say? What does that even mean? You know, like, and that's why I work with dreams, because I think dreams, everybody dreams every single night. And when you dream, you're out of the hypnosis of being a human in a physical body. You break
Mm.
out of that. You go into deeper fields. And so you can incubate healing dreams where you're like, I want to work with my ancestors tonight. I want to work with this rage. I want to sit with this part of myself. And the images come through the healing. I literally had, and I shared that on Instagram. I had a profound dream with my grandmother that died
Mm.
25 years ago, where she came into in a dream, and this woman did not speak any English. I'm originally from Cameroon, Central Africa,
Mm.
and my grandma was born in the 30s, 40s, at a time in Cameroon where women got married at the age of 13. You had many children, like there was polygamy, and she didn't speak a lick of English. She only spoke the tribal language. And so in life, I never got to connect with her or communicate with her. But then in this dream, she came to visit me and she was talking to me in perfect English. And the whole time I was in awe. I'm like, how are you speaking English? And she told me that her biggest sadness, sorrow in life was that she didn't learn how to read and to write, and that she made sure that my mom could read and write. And so, but I'm like, how can you, like, how are you speaking English, you know? And so when I woke up, that completely rearranged, reorganized something within me, because I had this way of viewing her as this illiterate woman, this woman who was not educated and she was backward, she didn't go to school. And so, but then I see her now in her solar essence, and she's absolutely not who I thought she was. And
Mm.
so, through dreams, you have this powerful experience that take you out of like your regular way of thinking. And so, even the people who we call our enemies, the people who are doing this very terrible things, everybody has soul level consciousness, and so it's working from that field of the heart compassion. And when we're working to see this, and you can only see that part of a person when you see it within yourself. And
Mm.
from that place, you can see them with compassion without erasing accountability for what they're doing. You can work towards justice without dehumanizing people or making them wrong, because what happens is that victims become perpetrators. People who are humiliated seek dominance, and the cycle really just perpetuates and repeats itself. And so that's why for me, working internally to heal yourself brings it to a level where then you have your offering, your contribution to the world. And it doesn't matter if your contribution is policy, if it's going out to protest, if it's music, if it's dance, healing. It's coming from a place of soul, of compassion, of basically bringing unity versus trying to, because when we like the division, like it's just a cycle. Literally, if you look down 1,000 years, it just keeps changing sides. And until we come out of the trauma fields and work from that level, we're just gonna perpetuate cycles.
100%. It makes me think too about the constellations work that you do, constellations work that I'm familiar with. I think of constellations work as a form of systemic healing, a form of healing systems, and whether it's the family system or an organization, I've seen the modality applied to organizations. And then also I've seen some really creative practitioners apply it to collective issues too. And just feeling what you said of the collective rage of this moment is too hard for the majority of us to hold. And I humbly believe it's actually just not meant to be held by individuals. You know, we live in such a culture that is so individualized, and even in our healing, a lot of times healing is thought about through therapy, through even yoga practices. You know, it's these very individual modalities, collective spaces to hold the collective pain feel so important to me right now. Because, I mean, even like what you and I are doing right here of taking a topic, dropping it in between us and seeing what arises, I feel like is the name of the game these days.
Right.
Having multiple physical bodies, human bodies, together in community settings that are well designed, that are well held, that are really baked with integrity, you know, to be able to conjure and name the realities that are present right now, you know, as far as these collective pain bodies. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that just from your experience with constellations or as you think about these topics, but that's where my mind went. But maybe you can even share what constellations is as a little setup.
Oh my God. Right. I was thinking
it's so true.
That's such a tricky thing to talk about.
I mean, the way that I like to describe it is, so family constellations is the origin of this type of modality. It's a healing modality developed by Bert Hellinger. And it's based on the idea or the understanding that family systems hold or are a field, right? They're a field of consciousness. And when there are disruptions or pains, or if somebody died too young and wasn't properly grieved and maybe was, or if there was some kind of exiling of a family member due to behavior or wrongdoing within the family's eyes, these systemic fractures, if you will, don't just disappear, they actually get carried over with each generation. And so the modality itself uses a group format. You can also use, you know, figurines. There's other ways to do it, but some of the ones that I found the most profound is when there are a group of people coming together, and it's not, you know, like drama therapy or anything like that. It's not people acting things out. It's people actually tuning themselves to a person's family's field and coming into a space of receptivity of where They just take small movements, and it's very much this kind of almost like, I think about it in terms of somatics, in terms of like really
Yeah.
noticing where and what your body wants to do, noticing in proximity to other people what the body wants to do, and as representatives of the family system, the family member actually getting to see
Right.
and sense the system in a new way.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you explained it. That was perfect. That was amazing, like how you explained it. And so you scale that up to ancestral lineage, archetypal constellation. So instead of the family field, then you're having people represent different groups. And in the archetypes, it's more of a spiritual constellation where, because when you work at that deeper level, you're crossing across multiple generations and timelines. So things are switching through. And I think, yeah, it's very profound to do this work. But what I've seen, the important thing with this type of work is the boundaries are really important. So, for example, I can lead a group healing constellation for Africa or for Cameroon because that's my field, for example.
Mm,
Any other field, I might have to be invited, and even then,
mm,
because you want people, like you cannot intrude, like so we cannot, like even in the work we do with my spiritual teacher, let's say there's something happening in some part of the world, we can't do a constellation for that part of the world because we're not in that field and we're intruding into it. It's not our story. And that's where you keep boundaries. People always like, we have to help everywhere, but there are spiritual boundaries and you have to respect them until somebody from within that field calls you or invites you in to support, then you have permission. But you can't just sit where you are and try to like I can't just say I'm going to do something for Native Americans. Like it's
right,
absolutely not my place. But when the invitation is there, when everything is in place, it's deeply, deeply profound. And that's why like Liz, like when I see the work that you do, like the We Heal for All the circles and the community, I think it's such important work that we need right now in the world to be able to sit together. And this is something again that indigenous cultures had that we have lost in our quest to become modern, to become individuals. And that's a really big part of, like the healing of the community of the individual is you heal by like the reflection of people, through you. I was really fortunate when my mom died. The morning I heard that she died, I was doing my graduate program, and we had like an in-person training that day or meeting, and somehow the lady who was leading had us each person like make sitting groups of 6 or 7 people, and they would play a song, and then one person will go into the center and you would just be witness fully for who you are.
wow.
And when they put me in the center, wow, I just like to be witnessed in that way. Like I just like let it, I let everything, I put everything down. And we need that support, we need that community. And even when I do dream circles, I just did one last weekend, we're dreaming for each other, we're healing for each other, and all of our stories, when one person heals, everybody in the circle gets the medicine too. And so it's so important for us to come together, especially in times like this with the level of heaviness and overwhelm that's present, to really be able to sit together, grieve together, heal together.
I'm really struck by the spiritual boundary piece that you
Hmm.
just spoke to there. I love that. It
It's
feels,
huge.
it's huge, because it really is, it reminds me of like codependent patterning, of especially I think givers, people who are naturally, and I don't say that even as like a humble brag
Right.
category, you know what I mean? There's just certain orientations in terms of people, and they tend to be in service professions, and they tend to be, therapists and teachers, it's, people who are just these kind of heart-centered helpers and healers. There really can be um, a desire, yeah, to help everyone, understandably, and to say, hey, I've got this set of tools, you know, that is working in this one way or this one way for me or this one way within this particular context, can I apply it elsewhere? But I felt such a grounded, such again, that kind of grounded spirituality and that very healthy, healthful forms of spirituality and spiritual healing. It also makes me wonder, like, because again, I think about the times in terms of, I think about the times evolutionarily and spiritually. And I think about the puzzle pieces that are in place right now. This age
Right.
of media, this age of education, this age of awareness is kind of like a catch-all term that I like to use for it. We are just, right, like aware, like it's just
Right.
all, and it's front and center. And at least for me as a feeler, as an empath, sensitive soul, like I feel it, right? It is like permeates through my
Right.
through me, and witnessing things halfway across the world, witnessing death, witnessing, thinking about Gaza right now, you know, is there any way that the times that we live in are inviting us into some kind of spiritual work or spiritual healing work? And the answer could very well be no. You know what I mean? Like this is one of those questions that I, you know, in terms of just our awareness of each other, our
Right.
awareness of each other's pain, and then also sensing it, you know, is it actually just about witnessing and seeing and like, I don't know, like where's the
Yeah, and
line in it, or what do you feel in that?
and this is something that I have, especially when we had the ice raids, the Minnesota stuff, like there was so much public outrage when we had Gaza earlier, like when the attacks like Ukraine, there's so much everybody is pushing you like say something, do something, show up in some way. And for me, it comes always down to the boundaries and perception because most of us we're working from empathy. And empathy, what I mean by that is I see all of this happening. I feel it deeply in my emotional body and I can resonate, I can feel your pain and my heart goes out to you. I want to support you. But the reality is if you're relating to the world and its pain from empathy, you're not helping anyone basically because you're at the same level, you're attuning to that trauma level. You're working from that level. And so to do this, the deeper work is working from the higher spiritual level, compassion. And to do that, that's where the inner work comes through, where you do your inner work to find your own path, your own offering, like your own contribution, because we each have something here to offer. And if you're just working from empathy, you're going to be dragged left, right, and center through all the news cycles. There's something today, tomorrow is Epstein files. There's always something going on. And so it's really learning to ground yourself. And one of the main like foundational practices that my spiritual teacher teaches us, I am here and you are there. That is your story. It's not my story. And when you hear that, it might feel like it's a lack of empathy. But what you're doing is you're giving space, you're separating your field from that person's field. So you're seeing them in the totality of who they are outside of yourself and your own story and your own entanglements because you cannot help them from your own space. You have to see them fully, and then from that place of seeing, then you see what is the action or the movement that I have to take to support that. But you have to make that boundary so you can see. And then the next part, which is really hard for healers and helpers and empaths, is when I cannot affect change, I withdraw my energy. When
Mm.
I cannot impact this field, I have no way, I withdraw my energy because people will keep trying and keep going and like you're not like you're inside depleting yourself. And so for me the work is we each have to do that inner attunement to ourselves and to see what is where are we called to contribute. And your rage, your shame, your anger, your fear, your grief, that might be pointing you in the direction of what is lighting your soul up, where you have resonance, where you were called to work or to contribute, whatever it is that gift is. But for me, it's always you have to tune in to connect and go to that higher level, and then from that place, see what your contribution is.
I love it. Because it is also new, this proximity to others,
Yes.
this proximity to the world is so new. And so I appreciate coming together with you and with others to, take what works well or what, spiritual principles of healing that
Right.
apply in certain contexts and being like, and trying them on here, being like, okay, how does this fit? And, I feel like it's such a moving target too, but having these kind of grounded spiritual principles in place to
Right.
turn to and root in feels really necessary.
Right. And it's interesting because for me, when you do your inner healing, like when you feel the rage and you follow the rage through to the source of that rage and you work with that, it gives you, at the end of it, there's always wisdom, there's always medicine. And as you begin to work with these different pieces, and that's what you can do. Like you read something or something comes up for you today and it activates you and you sit with that, you journal about that, you dream with it and you work with that, and at the end of that there's some medicine or some wisdom that comes true, and that's a puzzle piece for you. And as you're working over time, you begin to see the puzzle, like it becomes to create a picture of your purpose or your contribution or your gift, and the pieces begin to fall in place how you're supposed to support or be present right now in the times, in a very, because some people, like, your work is policy, like I'm going to try to change the policy. Some people is feeding people or offering food, or calling people is going to protest. Some people is music to make people feel. There are all these different ways that we contribute to the collective orchestra of healing that we need right now. And so it's just finding your own peace and trusting that what you're doing is enough.
Yes. I think there is something to the consciousness shifts that come with equipping ourselves to be able to pay attention in healthy ways. Like to your point, if we are so stuck in empathy or so stuck in the collective emotional body that's riddled with pain right now, then we aren't able to find the medicine and find the wisdom that's baked within it. If we get stuck in any layer, if we get stuck in just the material layer of
Right.
this world, then we miss out on an opportunity. And there is an opportunity that I see and feel so called to speak to and advocate for within these times and just this level of awareness. I think that's also where having spaces like the circle model that I offer and like, safe space that you provide for people and the work that you do to feel and allow the energy that's present to move through us and reveal what it's meant to reveal to us. Because the one thing I am sure of is that right now, everything's out the window, right? Like all the norms, all the world views, all the right? Like our shared sense of truth as a
Yeah.
society is fragmented, fractured, out the window.
Right.
There's so many parts of our collective sense of self that are having a makeover. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, what does it mean to be a human these days is being
Yeah.
questioned. And so finding our purpose, having a clearer sense of self within the collective, and then even right living the questions of what does it mean to be alive and to be a human and to be of
Right.
service is like us doing that dirty work on behalf of the collective, but not dirty, but doing that
Right.
beautiful work of like
Right.
being in this active reconfiguration process as a society. We're co-creating the shifts in collective oh my goodness, you're kidding. We've got a little a little
Okay.
little
Sounds too
cameo
much.
from Knox or but yeah, it just makes me think too of just the the higher order possibilities or invitations that are here and present, you
Yeah.
know.
And I think the hard part, like what you're saying is like the hard part with doing the spiritual work or doing the inner work or showing up every day to support or to offer yourself, your heart, is that with it's the spiritual work that we do, there are no tangible markers of success.
Mm.
Like it's not linear where if you have a job or you have something that you're doing, like even like something like, oh, I have to write a book, the steps that you take, and then you publish the book and you have something tangible to show. And the spiritual work, like whatever that it like you're doing, if sometimes it might feel like nothing is happening and nothing is changing, and that you're not enough, to make any impact or to support in any way. But for me, it's like I like to look in the same way how you have one individual that can shift the whole collective field of the US in like a
Mm.
crazy way. You
Right.
can also have another individual that can shift it all back into higher consciousness, like a person like Gandhi, for example. Like he was able to stabilize enough in a higher consciousness where he could actually bring about practical change. And so for me, it's like it's an opportunity, an invitation for us to step into who we are, and who we're what our offering is in this time and in this space while we're here. And that's why it's so important. I talk about like the ancestral work where you turn to them and tell them, I have my own conflicts of life in this moment and in this time, and I want to work within my greater nature for the success of our lineage,
Mm.
upon the earth, so that I can also offer my gifts to those who I'm going to become the past to and who are going to become the future, and so you thank them for your life, for everything, but you say, now I want to do my part within the current day conditions. And that's where you're like disentangling yourself so you can see really what your own story is, what your own contribution is. So you're not only repeating their story, but you have yours and you can like help to raise the overall frequency, of the earth at this time.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that imagery of acknowledging, honoring, and then disentangling in order to carry things forward. I feel like we could do this
We got
all
this. And
day.
we have support. We have so many invisible allies, and we're not doing this by ourselves. And that's
That's
what
right.
if it feels like we are by ourselves in this, but we have so many allies and they're all there waiting to support us and to help us and just asking for help. Like, I don't know what to do. I am lost. Show me the way. Teach me.
Mm.
Like just teach me, show me, like I don't know, show me, take me. And that's the thing I feel like in the Western world we're taught so much to be the doer, to do everything. But in this work, we learn to surrender, to let go because we can't do it. And you're asking something greater within to take you forward, to teach you, to show you the way forward. How can we? Because it's crazy times that we're in right now. And when you sit and look at it from personality, it's hopeless. Like you feel hopeless, like everything is insurmountable. And that's why it's so important to ground, and tune in and tap in and have that flow through you, and from there like there's a path that opens.
Mm. I mean, just as we close out here, is there anything else you want to share? And then, if not, how could people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, no, I think for me, if I would share one thing, is just there's so much power and agency in the heart. And right now, everything feels super hopeless. It feels like nothing that you can do could make a change, or all the emotions, everything feels overwhelming. But it's really connecting to your heart. And there's this breath of love that Hilda Charlton gave, which I invite people to use. And when you feel overwhelmed by the chaos in the world, you bring your attention to your heart center, and it's that point on your chest where you point and say I. And you're going to take two quick inhales and exhales into your heart center, and then a long exhale. And that's the breath of love. Like and you're releasing and you're allowing your heart center to expand within you. And that breath of love, you can do it multiple times a day. And with the inhale, you can imagine golden light coming into your heart space, and that's opening and holding you and is sustaining you through. That's an invitation.
Thank you for that. That's
Sure.
beautiful.
And yeah. And for connecting, I am most active on Instagram. My name is Multidimensional Mama, and my website is also multidimensionalmama.com.
Awesome. Yeah, all that will be in the show notes too. And great. And you offer, what type of services do you offer too?
Where I do very deep one-on-one healing work with bereaved mothers. I also work with other bereaved people if they come to me, and I use the modality of dream work, also spiritual healing. I do some shamanic breath work, and then I do constellation works depending on what people are needing. And so right now in my community, I do like a lot of spiritual healing and dream circles, and it's open to anybody. But then the one-on-one work, I do a lot of that with bereaved mothers.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Ning. This has been rich and powerful, and I'm very grateful to it.
I'm deeply grateful for you inviting me here, for us having this conversation, and for you holding space for the world, for community in the way that you are doing, because I really feel like it's so necessary to have these spaces, these conversations that feel nourishing and that make people feel seen and validated and held. So thank you for sharing your light with all of us.
Thank you so much, Ning. I'm really receiving from that.
Thank you.
Thank you to you and your heart and for being here. If you enjoyed this episode and received from it, send it to a friend and use it as a way to build community and connection that this world deeply needs right now. Subscribe to tune in each week for more tools, conversations, and support on collective healing. And check out my latest book, When the World Hurts, upcoming circles, and online courses to go deeper. Sending you love from the Bronx. Take care.